Welcome to the Matthew Moran podcast. Here you will find a series of in-depth conversations with the world's best nature photographers, filmmakers, conservationists, editors, writers, and publishers. You will get an insight into the lives of creative professionals and industry experts, what goes on in their minds, how they approach their work, and how they make it pay. The podcast also looks at the role that photography and filmmaking plays in helping to raise awareness about the global plight of species. And despite the depressing statistics, we look for solutions, what we can all do to contribute to conservation. All my guests give up their precious time and are incredibly generous of spirit. So this is my chance to share these conversations with you. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Today is a podcast special where we focus exclusively on a very special and important photographic book. Published in November 2020, the book is entitled Hidden: Animals in the Anthropocene. It is an unflinching book of photography documenting our relationship with non-human animals in the 21st century. It focuses on the invisible animals in our lives, those with whom we have a close relationship and yet fail to see. They are the animals we eat, the animals we wear. They are the animals used in research for entertainment, as well as the animals we sacrifice in the name of tradition and religion. This book is epic. It's huge and packs a punch right from the off. But it's not sanctimonious, nor there to wag the finger, but rather start a conversation, or continue a conversation which is coming to the fore in so many guises about our relationships with animals. And it is my great pleasure to have Joanne MacArthur and Keith Wilson, co-editors of the book, to talk in depth about the birth of the idea, the monumentous task of selecting the contributing photographers, to the unenviable task of editing all their work. Joe and Keith are both previous guests on the podcast, so if you want to learn more about them individually, you can find them on the podcast page on my website. And I'll remind you all about this at the end of the show, but you can order copies of Hidden direct from We Animals Media. Go to the link in the write-up on the podcast page and act fast. The first print run sold out in a matter of weeks. And I've got a good feeling that the second print one's going to do the same. All right, that's enough for me. On with the show. Welcome back, Keith and Joe. This is really exciting for me to have you both back on the podcast. I've got 26 now under my belt, and I've toyed with the idea of what point can you get previous guests back on the podcast? When is that credible? Do you have to do 50 or 100? But yeah, as I've mentioned before, anyone who's interested in you both individually are just going to have to go back and listen to your individual podcasts. Keith, you were my second guest 4 years ago.
God, it's
Joe, I know it's a long time, huh?
Yeah.
And Joe, you were this time last year. We were or just a little bit before, sitting in my studio talking about the early days of Hidden, and now you're back and book's been published, and well, must be such a thrill after so much work for you to have the copy, see it in your hands, see it getting the response it's getting. But yeah, this is the reason why we're all here, a very special reason to talk about this book. And first of all, I just want to say congratulations. I've got my copy, and it's quite an amazing piece of work. So yeah, you both should be really proud. It's a really incredible piece of work. And before I forget, because this is very important and very hot off the press, another congratulations to Joe for winning in the Nature Photographer of the Year. That must have been a nice piece of news recently.
There's so much going on right now. It's a really nice end of the year. I remember taking that picture and feeling like it was something really special. And this award seems to agree with that. It's a kangaroo in a burned eucalyptus plantation. And it's called Hope in a Burned Forest. It's a very sad image, but also poignant and hopeful. I'm glad it's resonating with people.
Yeah, it's really
it's
fantastic.
A beautiful photograph.
Yeah, congratulations.
Hey, Matt, you mentioned we were sitting here, you and I, a year ago in your studio, but we had also spent the day in the cold photographing Animal Rebellion and Extinction Rebellion together.
That's right. I mean, what a difference a year makes. Who would have known what was just round the corner? We had our freedom back then, didn't we, to ride on the tube and go out and photograph and go and get food from the shops, not wearing masks. The good old days. Just a crazy, crazy year. But well, what a also great show of resilience, because we can talk a little bit later about the crowdfunder that you started for the book. Didn't put you off. A pandemic didn't put you off your schedule, which was really, really good. But first of all, I just wanted to start off by talking about the book's title, Hidden: Animals in the Anthropocene, and how you came about that. Because I know from my own experience, whenever I talk to other bookmakers, finding the title is one of the hardest things with bookmaking. So yeah, can you talk a bit about how you came to that decision?
Yeah, I know exactly how this could go. I can answer the first part and Keith can answer the second part. I love it. I absolutely love it. I had thought of the idea of this book many years ago, and my working title was always Animals in the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene is the proposed name for the current geologic epoch. And everyone said there's no way you can have a title like that. People don't know what that word is. It's too long. It's not catchy. Big no. And so Keith and I were hemming and hawing over titles for a long time until,
of course, our very astute designer, David Griffin, came up with the title of Hidden. And, it was perfect. It's a perfect word. It's short and absolutely describes to a T the status of all the animals that are featured between the covers of this book, particularly those in industrial farming situations, but also transport. But the whole issue itself, we do our best to hide it from our view or try and deny that these things are going on or that we are in some way complicit. And so Hidden just was perfect. And, from an editor's perspective, I also thought, yeah, it's good because when something's hidden, it's usually kept in darkness as well. And a lot of the pictures in the book, because of the circumstances and the situation, are shot in darkness or in very low light situations. And so it was the perfect title. And hats off to David Griffin for coming up with what I think was the perfect word.
And it had never occurred to me that the working title could simply be the subtitle. Hello. there we have it. Everyone's happy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly one of the big advantages, collaborating, right? And sharing ideas. Totally. I think, especially with your work, I know from speaking to you before, Joe, we spend so much time on our own, don't we, in our own world, and that's also because of the nature of the work. It's difficult to do it in big teams, especially when you're going on covert missions. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the same when it comes to ideas and what we're going to do with our work and how we're going to get it out there, whether that's a book or with video or social media, is just talking to people and bouncing ideas. And yeah, sometimes it's staring you right in the face, but I agree, it's what a great title. And to encapsulate that in one word is perfect. Joe, you mentioned, you mentioned that you'd had this idea for a long time. Like how long?
Since I had seen James Nachtwey's book, Inferno, which is a tome, a massive compilation of what we do to one another as humans, civil war and genocide and famines. And it was just this unflinching document. And I remember being in complete awe of this body of work and knowing that I wanted to do something like this, but for animals. And it took a while to do. I made other books in the meantime, but this idea never left me. And then the idea grew stronger when I realized that it would be a stronger book if there were many contributors. And it would be a stronger book still if I had some fantastic collaborators. So I had seen what Britta Yashinsky and Keith had done with Photographers Against Wildlife Crime. And I absolutely knew that I wanted to team up with them. And I did team up with both of them because Britta ended up influencing and working on the book quite heavily as well. And we invited David Griffin, who worked on Photographers Against Wildlife Crime, or Keith, rather, you invited him. And one of us invited him,
Yeah.
but he said yes.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we had this dream team, and we needed funding for the dream team. So I think that that's a whole other story, a successful one.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's, that was one of my questions. I think it's, when you're talking about a book, and particularly to an audience of, obviously a big portion of my audience are photographers, but also designers, writers, editors, publishers. And I think people are also interested in how these books get made and how much they cost and all the decisions behind the size, the format, and you've got all of these parameters and issues around, how the images fall on the page. But one of the things that, the biggest thing when you open up this book, first of all, it's huge. And when my book arrived, the packaging was huge. I'm like, wow, this is really already making a big impression. But that's certainly, you mentioned tome. It really feels like that. It's a heavy book. It seems like no expense spared. And I know from making my own books, one of the key elements when you're going to have to ship these around the world, it's kind of really boring, but it's the cost of postage. So you guys must have spent a hell of a lot sending these things around the world.
Yeah, that's actually a nightmare, those costs. But maybe we'll just skip that painful topic, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good idea. That's not a good thing to focus on.
It is a nightmare, particularly when you're talking a big, substantial, heavy book like Hidden. Once you go over that 2 kilogram threshold at the post office, you enter a whole new level of expense. And I've worked with as I've worked with a lot of photographers to produce their books, publish their books, and it's amazing how many seem to, even though you breach the subject quite early with them about the cost of distribution, make sure you factor that in. That sort of gets ignored until much, much later. And then suddenly they realize, oh my God, it costs a hell of a lot to send all these copies out. It can cost more than actually printing the book, depending on obviously on how many you are printing. And so, as a project manager at stroke editor, I also, I'm always keeping an eye on what I think the weight of the book is going to be, especially when they, someone's wanting to put in more pages or go to a bigger format, this sort of thing. You're immediately in your head trying to work out, okay, how many more grams is this adding up to? Am I getting close to this 2 kilo?
Are you basically saying, Keith, that this is all Joe's fault?
That's what I'm hearing.
Not at all. No, I've had this experience quite a number of times before. Obviously, Joe and I got together to work on Hidden, but the thing that Joe made very clear right from the beginning was that she wanted a book that would match Nachtwey's Inferno, Salgado's Workers in terms of scale and dimension. And and she said, a 5-pound book, because obviously over in Canada they're still on imperial measures. She didn't mean one costing £5. So it was very clear right from the beginning that we wanted a book of scale. So that did mean, okay, we've got to bite the bullet on this, and that's what we've produced. And to hear your reaction, Matt, to the size of the box and then the book itself, is just, in a way, now looking back on all this, it's music to our ears, because if it's making that sort of impression on everyone, then we know we have succeeded.
Yeah, and I think it's a difficult process to try and make money from a book that's, especially a self-published book. There are so many costs involved. There are so many hidden, terrible pun, but it's, I think a lot of people just don't realize that. But if you can come out of this, having it paid for, I mean, I don't know about you, Joe, but I don't set out to make loads of money. You can't make loads of money unless you're J.K. Rowling or, Julia Donaldson. But it's, I think if there are always compromises. There are always these parameters that say, okay, you have to make this compromise for the good of the book. But I think knowing that was your dream, and you've also been through the process publishing. Was it two books you published before, isn't it?
Published by Lantern. This
Right,
one was
okay.
self-published. Yeah.
Yeah. So so going through that and having that no expense spared approach, I'm sure most people would have reacted like me. And I think another thing that I was really interested to talk to you both about is, when opening the book, it's a very weird feeling that I got, which is one of, wow, this is like beautiful, but also terrifying. And, I had that just the first few spreads, you just go straight in, full bleed, double page spread images. And I have that pit of my stomach feeling. And, I've made no secret. I don't have to. I've been vegan for 8 years and I've watched the videos. I've read all the data. It doesn't get any easier looking at this stuff. But at the same time, there's a real kind of beauty and quality to the book that makes it, exactly that. It's a beautiful product, but with very harrowing content. And how much of that was intended in when you set out to do this?
Do you want to go first, Joe, or shall I?
No, you go ahead, Keith. This is for both of us, but you take this one.
Okay. I think that was very much the intention, because a lot of the photographers, even though they're, sometimes they work together as well, when they're documenting things like going on investigations in factory farms and things, fur farms, that sort of thing. But they do have some quite different styles as well. And there was some photographers I noticed, looking at their styles, was it Stefano Bellacchi is one that comes to mind, and when you speak to him or read what his influences are, he's very much influenced by Renaissance style lighting, and that comes through in a lot of his images. And they are, as you say, they're beautiful to look at. And of course you want that, because there's sort of like, despite the horrors of what's going to happen, because every animal that's featured in this book, pretty much every animal that's featured in this book, it is now dead, or is going to die, or is dying, as you see in some of the photographs. And yet there's in some images there is a real sort of like painterly quality about some of them. There's a very high artistic aesthetic, and so that I was conscious of that. We did want this to be, as you say, beautiful to look at, even though it's harrowing, the subject. Whereas if it'd been sort of like too explicit, too graphic, too bright, and it would have stopped the engagement between the viewer and the book, and in which case we wouldn't be fulfilling our objective, which is to get people, whether they're knowledgeable about the subject or not, but is to really engage with every picture on the page. And that was certainly at the forefront of my mind, when going through the whole editing process.
If I can add there, that was a mammoth editing process. We had thousands upon thousands of images to go through, and I was very attached to many of them. But Keith and I continued to agree when we landed on those absolute brilliant images. We felt that they needed 2 pages. They needed to be across 2 pages over and over and over. Now, it's a 320-page book, and it could have had 1,000 images in it. Absolutely. But that's not the impact that we wanted to make. I think this makes a greater impact. Unfortunately, it means that, many images had to hit the editing room floor. I shed a few tears over that. Absolutely. Keith could probably, like, my whining is probably still reverberating in his ear. Like, come on, please, not this one. We have to keep this one. But we had to pick the strongest of images, and I have to credit Keith for doing that very heavy lifting at the end. Once we had whittled down, we had whittled down to maybe 1,500 or 1,000 images, and then Keith had to do that last leg of making a colossally fantastic narrative, which he did.
It's amazing, and I think Keith, you talked a bit about just what you were doing there, and whittling thousands and thousands of images down. And I think for those who don't know, could you talk a little bit more about the role of an editor in this book? Because kind of as Joe said, why do you need an editor? Like, photographers know what a good image is and what a bad image
don't.
Is, so.
Well, Joe, probably the most important word that that Joe just used is narrative. And when you're doing a book or a portfolio, for instance, I was helping one photographer just recently with their submission for Wildlife Photographer of the Year for photojournalism. And the point is, whether it's 10 images as in that case, or just over 200 as we have in the case of Hidden, it is about telling a story. Okay, you have pictures that the story is complete within those 4 frames of the single image, but then there are others which are a sequence, and so it's a case that you've got to look for something where there is obviously a narrative going on, whether it's standing on its own or whether it's part of a sequence. And we had mixtures of both in editing Hidden, and you see that in the book as well. There are some where there are obvious sequences and they're grouped together, and then the others, as Joe says, the DPS, as double page spread, I should say, the uninitiated, bleeds, so as big as you can possibly use them. And so it is storytelling. It's very journalistic, and personally, that's something that as an editor, as a photo editor, that I'm particularly strong, have strong feelings about. That's what really sort of excites me most. So I've been obviously doing that sort of thing for quite a while now, and I never tire of it. And it's when you get a subject like this, when someone like Joanne comes and gives you this extraordinary opportunity to tackle a subject that frankly has been ignored. I just sort of go, oh, yes, please. Yes. Hold me back. When can I start? It is to me very exciting. And if it's a subject that's particularly tricky, as this subject is, that sort of excites me more. I want to push the envelope. I want to, and when you look at the caliber of the photographers that we have, 40 photographers, a lot of them Wildlife Photographer of the Year winners, World Press Photo winners, really proven in their craft. You're going to have more, far more than you really need. There's not going to be any filling. And as Joe said earlier, that there is, unfortunately, there's hundreds and hundreds of others that didn't make it, not because they're not any good. It's just they just sort of didn't fit in with the flow of the book as it came together. It's a bit like doing a jigsaw puzzle in a way, except the pieces you have aren't already set. You make the pieces as you go all along and create the picture. And that means sometimes you have to choose one over the other, even though they're incredibly similar.
And Joe, how did you go about finding these photographers? And did you know that you needed a certain number, or were you more focused on a certain number of images rather than photographers? How did the process work?
Well, that's a perfect question, because had you not asked it, I would have led into that, because I have spent many years watching closely the work of animal photojournalists globally, and taking note of their names and following their social media and squirreling away some of their strongest images into folders on my desktop here and there. Bit of a mess, to be honest. But Keith mentioned that we have lots of strong photographers and award winners, but what we also have in the book are photographers who have been doing really strong investigative work for a very long time, but who don't submit images to awards. And also, awards are not often open to this kind of animal work. And in fact, a lot of awards explicitly exclude domestic animals. And yet they are living here on this planet, sentient beings by the billions. And we specifically exclude them. The awards explicitly make them, continue to make them hidden. And so that's why these animal photojournalists are not so much out in the world. We actually see their work in campaigns globally, but we don't see them out in the photo world, the awards world, and a lot of us know each other in that realm. Yeah. So,
so you were being an investigative journalist and detective and photojournalist. But actually, you mentioned the word animal photojournalist because this is something that's not a word used, but you hear it more and more these days.
Good.
So yeah,
very good.
Well, that is part of the plan of Hidden. As I was building Hidden this year with the team and with Keith and everybody, I realized that what we are doing is an emerging genre. It's not that it didn't exist before, but the team at We Animals Media and I wanted to give it a definition and some parameters. It is similar to and has grown from other kinds of photography like wildlife, conservation, street photography, conflict photography. It has those elements, but it is something a little bit different in its newsiness, in its timeliness. Did I cover that, Keith?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it was a real eye opener to me because it goes to that point just a minute ago that Joe said about not just award-winning world-class photographers that are sort of familiar names to the three of us, but also working on this book introduced me to this whole community, a community that was new to me of animal photojournalists. Who are, many of whom are, of course, are animal activists. That's really their driving force. They're wanting to go to these places and obviously just show what is going on. So I've been introduced to a lot of new work as well in putting this book together, which is very exciting. And pictures that otherwise we wouldn't see. So this is another part of why Hidden, I think, is so significant photographically is, yes, the subject it's covering, I should say, and introducing this whole concept of animal photojournalism to a much wider audience. And, of course, the third thing is introducing these photographers to a much wider audience as well, because they have been overlooked. And in putting this book together, over this horrific year, and we started before then, obviously last year, but look what's happened. We've had the Amazon fires, we've had the Australian climate fires, now we've had COVID-19. Suddenly all these things have a link to the subject matter within this book, within Hidden. And that's made it even more important, the fact that you can't distinguish animal photojournalism apart from wildlife photography. You can't treat them as two distinct genres anymore. It all intertwines, and this is one of the things that's come out of this year photographically, I think. And there's no going back. Put it that way.
No, there certainly isn't, and I think that it's all part of the sea change that's happening, and is certainly over the last 8 years I've been vegan. The exponential rise is incredible. I mean, I just saw last week a big billboard advertisement when I was driving home the other day from Sainsbury's advertising a vegan Christmas. I mean, who would have thought that?
Yes.
Just like, even just a few years ago. And, I don't think Sainsbury's really care too much whether we're vegan or they just want to make money, right? So, when big organizations are getting involved, the shelf space is changing, and more plant-based products, and the whole movement's on the rise. It's no wonder. And I think, there is no turning back.
It's funny you should say that, Matt. I went into my, I can't remember which supermarket it was, Sainsbury's, Tesco, whatever, M&S, whatever, but I went in to buy stuffing, right? All the vegetarian stuffing was gone. Right? All the meat ones are there, but all the vegetarian stuff in it gone. I thought, buggers, but hey, that's good. It's it's changing rapidly, which is terrific.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of leads on to, Joe, I'll start with you on this question. I was going to ask it later, but this is the right time to ask it, is what can be expected from producing a book like this? Because you pour your heart and soul into it. You've been thinking about this for however many years, and the working in the background, squirreling away these other photographers' images, looking at who's doing it. The amount of work is just unbelievable. You produce this book, this incredible book. Of course, it's not going to change the world, and we can't expect it to, but we
excuse me
that that's a massive insult. Yeah, this is great. You want the biggest book that's going to cost the most money. You don't care. It's definitely going to change the world. Joe's ego is out of control right now. Of course it's going to change the world, but just think for a minute that it's probably not, but it's all part of riding this wave of veganism, of animal activism, of awareness of what's going on. But how do you kind of quantify, maybe it's too early now to talk about the success of this book, but how, you hoping to kind of quantify that, by producing such a book?
I guess I could get into some serious minutiae here, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to say that everything that my organization does is with the strategy of being one part of the piece of the puzzle with regards to like changing the world and changing things for animals. And so what we do is produce really strong photos and videos of what is and should never again be. This is one detail alongside the emerging field of animal law, which is booming, plant-based initiatives, neuroscience, journalism and the arts. There are so many ways that things are changing for the better for animals. And we are one piece of that. And so We Animals Media will just continue to think strategically about how we can reach people, what kind of projects we can do, and not just the investigative work like you see in Hidden that shows what is, but stories of change and progress and hope. And so we do actually do that too. We have a project called Unbound, which is about women animal advocates around the world. And we have set aside a certain amount of our funding for next year to tell the stories of change and progress, to inspire people. We know that Hidden can cause people to feel a bit of paralysis. And so we also need to do some hand-holding and some inspiring. So we'll do that too. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it totally did. And I think it's, I don't want to challenge you, but I just think, and what you say does come up a lot in these podcasts, particularly with, we talk about the word conservation photography a lot. And I think what I'm learning through having these conversations, and not just with podcast guests, but with other photographers all the time, is that photography is just one small piece. Filmmaking is just one small piece. And collectively with good NGOs, with really sound science, with getting this information in the right hands, hopefully policy change or attitude change.
Yes.
It's like, I think you said it already. It's just one piece of the puzzle, but you have to work relentlessly at that piece to stand out, to put your head above the parapet and say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is really important. Look, and what I really love when you go through these first few double page spreads in the book is, that introduction that says, don't turn away. I think that's so powerful. And it makes you not want to turn away. You want to read it. And I think going back to the book and the decisions around the text, for me as a bookmaker, I'm always fascinated in that as well. And you've both written really beautiful essays. And it's kind of punctuated just enough that you're not kind of, your eyes are burning from looking at all of these images. But yeah, the decision around that, how you decided how much text you were going to put in, who was going to write. And we've come this far and haven't even mentioned that you got Joaquin Phoenix to write the foreword. So you have to tell us about that scoop, please.
I will, but I want to shout out Keith right now, in fact, because he is the writer of the book. I did write an essay, but yeah, Keith, do you want to talk about that?
Writing. Yeah, it's Well, look, first and foremost, I'm a journalist, right? That's my training, basic skill. The fact that I've got into writing about photography is really just how my path has led. But writing about a completely new subject, a new experience to me is a challenge, as much of a challenge as doing the picture editing. And but I just I love really combining the two art forms in a way that you can, and sometimes you only can through a medium like a book, in such a substantial way. Yes, you can in some magazine articles and also even online on some portfolios, but when you're putting together a book like this, it's giving you a rare opportunity to really match the words to the photography. And that was the thing I was conscious of all the time, was matching whatever I wrote to the photography. So the writing actually was pretty much the last thing that was done, much to
Right.
the project managers. I kept getting these deadline reminders, and I'm sort of thinking, well, I can't start writing until I finish, we've finished the picture editing, because, otherwise I'm just writing blind with that, and it might not be relevant to the pictures that are finally chosen for this section.
You get 2 for 1 with Keith, right?
Yeah.
That's a good bargain.
But that's the thing. It's writing about photography and the story behind it. But also the other thing was, in research, I had to, obviously research. I spent a lot of time researching these subject areas, and because unlike the photographers and Joe, this was a very, very new area for me, and I didn't want to, make a fool of myself when so much trust was being placed upon me. And it was but it's great. I get excited about doing that. I suppose that's basic newspaper journalistic training, is you get thrown a story and you're not given much in the way of leads, and you have to produce it. So you immediately have to learn how to research quickly and sort out what is fundamentally important, and as opposed to extraneous matter. And
Yeah.
So the pieces, what is written, is they're quite short. They're very short, but that's because it's primarily a photo book. It's about the photography, but I also wanted the words to be read, and you don't want people's eyes glaze over if they see too much text, and particularly if it's got more of an academic bent. No, I just wanted to say, okay, this is what's happening. This is what it's about. So there's some pretty raw stats and facts to support the text. But
Yeah, and beautifully designed as well. You've got these breakout quotes, really bold and quite shocking.
And when you get a top photo book designer like David Griffin working for you as well, he's done loads of stuff for National Geographic, for Washington Post, for Smithsonian. So he's got quite a good list of past performances. He is going to know what a really good picture is, and what's a good bit of copy to go with it, and how it should be placed on the page. So when you're aware of that sort of input that's coming from another direction, that's highly visual in its basis, then you've got to really be on your game.
And I like what you said about being thrown in to it, and particularly what you said earlier about the images, because and loving that, because I struggle to look through this book without these feelings of sadness and just the powerfulness of them, and the hopelessness in some cases. But that is I feel like it's quite a strong reaction, and perhaps Joe, we talked about this before, having to switch off some of those emotions just for the job in hand. But this leads me back to, which we haven't talked about yet, is how you met. What did you know Keith was going to be this? You're right, I'm going to go straight head first into this subject. I don't know it, but I'm not going to be put off by it. What was the original connection, and how you guys ended up working together on this book? And we'll come back to Joaquin later. We're putting him off.
So the origin story of Joe and Keith
The origin story. I
The
like that.
origin story, so sweet. It even involved a sunset. No, the short story is I had been brewing on this for a long time, and was a fan of Photographers Against Wildlife Crime and Keith's writing and what he did. And so we were both at Photo London together, and we got into the conversation about this dream and the scope that I had for this. And yeah, Keith was captivated by this, and we sat on the curb at sunset and dreamed really big about what this book could be. And I don't think I had to confirm with him that he was involved. I think that was it, wasn't it? I think we knew we were doing this project.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, it's sort of gone into myth now, that meeting on the steps of Somerset House.
At least to us, it feels like that to us. I don't know if anyone else cares, but we love that story.
Yeah, we do. We think it'd make a great opening scene for the film. And I think, Jo could play herself. I don't know who could play me, though. I was thinking her dog, Banjo, actually. I think it looked rather fetching in my hat.
Joaquin.
Oh,
oh my gosh!
Joaquin,
this is it, guys. This is the movie.
Yeah, you're talking about dreaming big, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Keith, I think Jo would love to play opposite Joaquin Phoenix. Yeah.
Let's leave it at that. Oh my gosh, Keith! Imagine.
You've got to answer the question about, how did we get how did you get, I should say, Joaquin Phoenix to write the foreword of the book? Because that's no mean achievement.
Oh, Joaquin and I go way back.
There we go. That's what we need to know.
Yeah. Actually, both Matt and I photographed him when he was in London for the Banner Drop with Animal Equality. I had crossed paths with Joaquin 3 times that year, and I knew that he was aware of my work, and he had said that he was a fan of my work. So I thought, okay, well, that puts me in some decent standing. Let's see if he'll share his time and his name. And he did, and he wrote a very direct and strong forward. Wait a minute, intro. Yeah, forward. I read that and I thought, oh my gosh, it's perfect. I don't think we changed a thing, did we, Keith? Like maybe just one word or two.
Yeah, it was actually. I'm going to let in a little secret here. Right?
Oh,
we did. No, what is published is actually the second one. There was an earlier one which was much longer, and I really liked it. And we were toying with the problem that but it's more than what we asked for, so we haven't got enough space for it. These are the technicalities of books, isn't it? It was a very sort of personal view as well. But before we tried to were put in the position of, oh gosh, how are we going to do this? He then got back through his agent to say no, he wanted to change it and write something again, which is what ended up being in the book. So fortunately he solved that dilemma for us, and what he wrote the second time fitted beautifully onto the page that we had set aside for it.
What a great story. And I think it's really fitting, and this is another thing we're talking about, riding that wave, winning Oscars and using that platform to talk about the movement is hugely powerful. So this is a good time. I often talk to people, older people who imagine being vegan in the 80s when you barely had like one soy milk. You just there's a guy who works for an organization called Foxagon. His name's Terry. He's in his 60s, and he's one of those. And he said that he never ever would have imagined to be where we are right now, and that's real progress and a real success. So doing what you guys have done is a huge stamp on that, and a bigger platform. I mean, anyone who wants to do another book on animal photojournalism, my goodness, the bar's set pretty high. So of course we want that. We don't want to put people off. We want people to be out there and doing that, and I know the movement is growing and a lot more people are doing it. Sadly, the ag-gag laws are, in some places getting stronger, and in some places animal agriculture is increasing. And it is a constant battle, but we're definitely moving in the right direction, which is great news.
Well said. I can't add to that.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, well, I mean, we're obviously, this is a big celebration podcast of the book. And one of the things I really enjoyed reading were some of the quotes from some of the photographers and other people. You've got some great testimonials from Brent Sturton, from Michael Nick Nichols. Well, the one really stood out for me, and if you don't mind, I'm going to read it. It was from Nick Brandt, and because I just love it. It's just so passionate, and he simply says, "I am quite simply in awe of these photographers. In a way, they are like war photographers, except witness to a war that so many people choose to suppress that exists. This takes enormous inner strength and bloody-minded determination, because they cannot save any of the animals that they photograph. They can only hope that their photos will help illuminate the mass extermination that unfolds every second of every day across the planet. To me, they are heroes, not just for one day, but over and over again." I was like, wow, goosebumps, reading that. Yeah. And it's when you have this moment of clarity, I think, when you look through a book like this, and there are so many different species in here of animals. There's so many different uses, and I mean the spread at the end, with next to Martin Rowe's essay of all the kind of medieval tools, it's just really, really powerful. And on that, I didn't know anything about Martin Rowe, and I looked him up, and I was wondering, because I really encourage people who haven't read the book yet, or who will now go and buy the book as a result of this podcast, would check that essay out, because it's such powerful writing. And where did you discover him?
Martin is the publisher. He founded Lantern Publishing and Media, rather. And so he has published hundreds of books on various topics, many of which are about animal rights and veganism. And so I have worked with him since 2013, and he very quietly continues to publish his own books with beautiful writing and beautiful verse as well. He has the books called the Trumpiad, and they are written in verse, and they are just absolutely astounding. And in the Trumpiad the Third, he has a section on animals, and we are actually making that into a book on its own. And it starts with the image of the man clubbing a pig, which is in Hidden, and it goes from there. And so that's a book that's coming out in the spring. It's called The Animals Are Leaving Us.
Oh, wow.
Great. Something else to check out.
Yeah.
Nice plug. What really great writing, and a kind of fitting way to end the book. And it's a tough one as well, because I think another thing that I feel when I look through the images in the book is, I mentioned earlier about feeling sad, is that when you have these moments of enlightenment, you see all of this work, you just want to shout about it, and you want to go to your close friends who are not vegan and say, look at this, this is what's happening, do you see what's going on? And of course we all know that approach doesn't always work. It's not always the best to get up on your soapbox and wag your finger. So again, it's a real testament to be unflinching, but also trying to be understanding and compassionate, that not everybody can change overnight, not everybody can be an activist. But I think it's something that, what I was going to say was about the numbers of books that you printed, and trying to get this into the hands of people that are, you don't want to preach to the converted. How do you do that?
Yeah, I'd love to speak about that. Printing 3,000 books can only go so far if they're sitting on people's coffee tables. And while we want people to purchase the book and have the book, it's not always the main reason to make a book. The book in itself is a statement, and is a statement that can be broadcast widely, which is why we're really pushing to have the book covered in major media. And so that will be ongoing. We're going to have the book at festivals. We're going to have a lot of people talking about it. And that has started, and we've barely started. It shows that there's that the book is timely, and it's gone well so far. Eric Hilaire at The Guardian called it a milestone in photojournalism, which made me very happy. And they've covered it already. They're covering it again next week. And so I hope that answers a little bit about, the small number of books versus the high impact that we hope to have.
Yeah, that's very true. If I can just add to that, because I get asked that question too, and it's a book is more influential than the actual numbers of copies that are sold. Right?
Yeah.
It's about the discussion that it creates, and you only need one person to start a discussion. And that's what the book is. It's sort of a catalyst for that sort of discussion. And then what helps that discussion to grow and spread is obviously media pickup. And, I found that out with Photographers Against Wildlife Crime. It was a small print run, but by gosh, that's had a huge impact and influence. And Hidden already is doing something very similar.
So how many did you print in the first run?
We printed 2,000 Hidden.
Yep.
Yeah. And then we sold out really quickly to our surprise, which was unfortunate. I mean, it's a great problem to have, but Amazon put a big, stamped out of stock on it, which is really unfortunate when in the very same week, National Geographic has talked about it in their newsletter. I know. So we reopened Indiegogo where people can continue to order the book. And
so people can continue to order that now. It's very important to get that clear.
Yes, they can. You
That's
can
great.
still order the book.
And it's reprinting this week. We're on Friday. So yeah, it's reprinted. So
fantastic news.
And so those will be, people can buy it now, but they'll be available end of January, early February.
That's great. And then you talked about only just getting going, and of course one of the difficulties now is going to photo festivals, and with everything still shut down because of COVID. What are you doing? I mean, obviously you've got great press packs, you're sending those out, and have you been doing any online events, that kind of thing? And how long? Because of course you've got this release in November, and a book is hot for so long, right? So how are you going to maximize this time right now?
Well, I'm feeling the pressure now. Thanks, Matt.
Well, do you know what? I'm saying this because I also think it's so funny. Like creating a book is so much hard work, and then you get it back from the printers, and you're checking it out. The images look great. There's no typos, and then the hard work really starts because you got to get this thing out there.
So true. So true.
Having the book in your hands is not the end; it's the start. It's start part 2.0. So things will be harder with COVID, but we are pushing really hard, and we have not just Keith and I, but a team behind it. We have people who really care and who are helping promote it. We also raised enough funding to be able to send out a number of books free to influential people. And so we'll be sending 100 to 200 of those books, and people are writing to us with nominations about who they want to have the book. And that's a big expense, like with the shipping and stuff. Oh my goodness.
Sure.
Like, what? Did we really agree to this? But, it's really important for us to do that. And
I mean, you don't have to name any names. Are you influential people? Are these also politicians, policymakers?
Exactly.
Yes, they are. Yeah. And influential people and journalists, young people, politicians, even chefs have been nominated.
Great.
Yeah.
And we've also got an exhibition in Germany, which is the date has moved a few times because of the situation with COVID, obviously, but it's definitely going to happen. And basically from the middle of February until middle of April at a gallery in Berlin. And
they're called F3.
F3, that's right, the F3 gallery. I mean, because of COVID, it means the launch, unfortunately, will probably be a virtual launch, but, all the planning's being made and pictures chosen and, all those technicalities with mounting an exhibition. And so that's going to be quite a big deal when that happens. And we're both definitely looking forward to that. And and of course, there's going to be corresponding media pickup and interest in Germany because of that. And we've actually, it looks like we've got a fair bit of German media activity already lined up to coincide with that, which is terrific. So yeah, there's all these things, but one of the pleasing things about that is that we didn't approach them; they approached us.
Exactly.
And that was extraordinary. It was like an email came in, and that was before we'd even printed the book. It was, yeah, that was quite astonishing. But we just thought, wow, if it's already making this sort of impact in the fine art photography world, the gallery world, yeah, we must be onto something here. So yeah, that's been a terrific
And
response.
that's the ultimate endorsement, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I think that I love hearing stories like that, because you listen back to the last hour of us talking, the big message, well, there's so many big messages, but one for me is of hard work and long-term effort and, yes, strategy. But you also put this stuff out there with an unknown, and that is so good when you get that kind of feedback. That's not you hustling someone. It's like, hey, look, we've seen this. You've done your job. You've put it out there. I think it's always the way, you've done your best. And then when you get that kind of feedback and those kind of opportunities, it's completely with merit. So yeah, well, congratulations on that. That's great. Well, let's hope there's like more take up for exhibitions worldwide. What about Canada, Jo?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess Canada's next. First Germany, then the world, as they say. That old saying.
Exactly.
In fact, we did have the National Photography Museum of Colombia wrote to me asking if I would come and spend about 5 days there exhibiting the work and speaking. And I also had no idea they existed. So I think the more visibility we get, the more this will continue, and we'll certainly push it. That's the whole point of creating a project, especially a project that is meant to affect change. So,
exactly.
Yeah, and that's important as well. Obviously, we mentioned that before, but reaching new audiences, and you could go on your circuit, I'm sure, and like you mentioned earlier about this being the bubble in the Wildlife Photography Awards and going to the same festivals every year. Obviously that is important, but it's always about reaching new audiences to change some hearts and minds.
Speaking of those awards, I was so surprised to be invited to be on the jury of World Press this year.
Another congratulations.
Thank you. I was surprised because, I have been submitting my damn images for 20 years and not winning. And they're one of the awards that have said, you can't submit images of domestic animals. And I think it's interesting that I'm a selection for them in the nature category. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what is submitted and being influential in that world.
Yeah, and particularly with this year of people photographing locally, not being able to travel so much, it's going to be really interesting to see what comes out in that exhibition for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a really good move, that, and I'm sure that's going to encourage a whole nother bunch of photographers to enter.
Have you been on that jury, Keith?
No, good grief, no. I don't know the right people.
Why do you say it like that?
Well, I don't know the right people for a start. But it's gosh, I would love to, because I mean, at the end of the day, my first love, my training is through press photography and working with press photographers in my own newspaper journalistic days, but that belongs to another era, that's for sure. But I've done, obviously, my own fair bit of competition judging, but primarily in Europe, actually, rather than here in the UK or across the pond in North America. All my competition judging has been, in Europe, with the European Wildlife Photographer of the Year and the Nature Photographer of the Year. So I don't know, maybe I appeal more to the speakers, the non-English speakers, than I do to the English speakers. It could have something to do with my Australian accent. But, it's seen as something quite, exotic and exciting across the channel, but a real turn-off across the Atlantic. Well,
I always think of you as very exotic. Absolutely.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. The exotic character in Wimbledon in South London.
yeah. Don't give the rest of the address, please. But
And Joe, what about you? I mean, obviously your year's been somewhat wiped out. Travel. I think when we spoke on the last podcast, you talked about traveling to over 60 countries, and you've been in one for the last 9 months, I'm guessing. Mm-hmm. And how's that been for you?
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure because I haven't sat still in over a decade, and I keep wanting time at home, but there are just too many compelling projects, and I'm not one of these sit still type of people, but I've really needed it. And so I'm very grateful to have had this time. Also, I'm building my organization, We Animals Media, and it's really important for the founder and executive director to actually be in one place for more than a week to help build a very solid foundation. So we've done that in many ways with contributors and donors and partnerships. So it was very good timing.
And we should also add that, actually, I don't think we mentioned this already, that We Animals have published the book. So you are now a book publisher as well. Was that the decision that was made early on? Did you know that was the way you wanted to go, rather than, I mean, I know we talked about who would want to publish this book, so you just took that decision right off the bat for yourself?
Sure did. Might regret it slightly. It's a lot of work. Think very carefully if you want to publish your own book. And this is, this mention is long overdue, but Sarah Jansen is our project manager. She has so much enthusiasm and energy. And so, Keith and I get to be on the podcast with Matt Moran and all this stuff, but Sarah has organized everything from A to Z. And let me say that Keith and I are procrastinators. Hello, we have a lot of passion, but Keith is making a surprised face right now. Okay, maybe not procrastinators, but we kind of get things we work right down to the wire. Is that a nicer way of saying it?
Yeah, but there is a reason for it. There is a reason.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. As you said earlier, there's a reason that the writing came in right at the end there. But Sarah kept everything on track, and she, WAM, We Animals Media, is the publisher, but it's almost like Sarah is the publisher because she has dealt with every single dollar, every single person. So thank you, Sarah.
Yeah. Yeah, I will second that, and I hope she's recovered from my copy deadline, procrastination, as Joe calls it. But it was just it's just there's deadlines and there are deadlines.
And that's cool, isn't it? I mean, this is a place for unsung heroes, and we need these people in our lives to get organized and to we have the dreams and the fantasies, but you need deadlines and you need spreadsheets, and it's great to have someone like that.
Yeah, definitely.
I think I'm going to get a call from Keith after this podcast about the procrastination thing.
What? Hang on. Sorry, I've lost sound. What was that?
Oh, that's convenient.
Right, this is turning into a bit of a love-in here. I just wanted to, we're going to slowly come to an end and ask about, kind of near, medium, and long-term goals with this book. I mean, obviously, it's just started off so well, hit the ground running. You're getting a second print it's printing on Friday, you say. So what's next? What's going to happen in the beginning of 2021 with this book?
More of this, more pushing, more letters to media to get them to cover it, more promotion of the photographers. It's fantastic that this book gives them an additional opportunity to shout about their work and have their work visible, to show that their work is important. I love that.
Yeah, that's definitely the way. It's I'm quite excited with the fact that I'm sort of these last couple of weeks I've been working on some actual dedicated articles for photography magazines, which again would not have covered this work. And it's there's take up. So early issues of magazines for next year, you are going to see some reference not just to Hidden, but also to some of the photographers who have contributed, who are who are not as well known as, say, Joanne or Britta Yashinsky or Paul Hilton or people like that. And that's quite exciting for me as a writer, because I feel like that giving them a bit of a breakthrough into the mainstream world that really has passed them by because of this subject. And so I'm looking forward to not only seeing those pieces published, but to see and hear their reactions. That's always a nice thing.
And that's great as well, because that comes back to Nick Brent's quote about them being the heroes.
Exactly.
Right. The all of you that are going in and into these places, and I think you said in the first podcast, Joe, it's shit work, and it's unrelenting, and that really is heroic. So it's great that they're getting exposure through this, and well, I mean, I will salute you both. It's just an extraordinary book, and actually, it's been good having you on for this podcast, because it's definitely forced me to look at it in more detail than I probably would have, and it's quite compelling photographically, design wise. People have to go out and buy this book, and it's not just beautiful, but it's really important. I think it's a really important piece of work, and it's hopefully it's going to provide a platform for more of this kind of work, and I'm looking forward to seeing even more great press and more exhibitions, and just continue to ride the wave with this. It's so good. So thank you so much, guys.
Well, thank you.
Great job.
Thank you for your part in getting the message out there. It's terrific, and
exactly.
we're very appreciative.
Thanks for sharing this amazing platform with us to talk about this book that we are so proud of. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's great to be chatting with you again.
Great. And we did it. I should have mentioned at the beginning, this was my first podcast with two people, and
wow.
This is,
and you chose us.
You're my guinea pigs.
So proud.
Well, it'll be.
And hey, this is one of the advantages as well of the pandemic. I was a real snob before. I was only going to do interviews face to face. So good luck trying to do that during a pandemic if you want to reach a worldwide audience. Yeah. So yeah, we got Zoom, Zencaster, podcast mics. It's currently how we have to do things, but it's good. And the point is to get these stories and messages out there. So hopefully this will reach some unconverted people to get out there and see this work.
I'm sure it will. I mean, my first wish for next year is that Joe and I can finally meet up after publication, actually have a celebratory drink for the launch, because I think of when we launched, the official launch of Photographers Against Wildlife Crime, and of course, it was an exhibition. There was a whole gang of us, lots of people, celebratory drinks, pictures, proper launch.
You need that, don't you? You really need that. And I was just thinking, I think, if you do that and you're going to meet up with a bunch of people, you two have to meet first and go and have a drink outside Somerset House on the curb.
We'll probably get arrested. I'm not sure you're allowed to drink on the steps there, but I mean, of course we will. Of course we will.
When they come to arrest us, we'll say, "Do you know who we are?"
I was going to say hand them a book, but it's too expensive to give away.
Yeah, right.
Guys, thanks so much for coming on. And Keith, you've given up your Friday night. Joe, you're in Toronto. You got the rest of the evening ahead. I hope you enjoy it, and we'll get this out there as far and as wide as possible. Thanks so much, you guys.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Matt.
That was a lot of fun. Thanks, Matt. Great to see you both.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Keith. What a great way to start 2021 with a success story. I think we need more of these this year, that's for sure. And you can help by supporting We Animals Media, who do amazing work on many fronts, from now publishing books to their incredible archive of images, giving animal photojournalism a global platform. Head over to the Hidden podcast page on my website for links and more info, and get involved. Especially all you veganuarists. It's such a good time to absorb and share as much information as you can to keep the momentum of this great movement driving forward. A quick personal thanks from me for all the lovely comments about the podcast throughout 2020. I've more great guests lined up for 2021, so stay tuned. Until then, have a happy new year.